Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. We start our news bulletin from Nigeria, where 30 people have been killed in attacks on 2 villages in northwestern state of Katsina. Police said armed bandits burned 21 people to death, while 9 villagers were shot dead in Dankar and Sawa. Police said motorbike riding assailants made off with food and livestock after the attack. It said investigative teams have been deployed to the villages. Hundreds of people have been killed in Nigeria's northwest since last year in robberies and kidnappings. The death toll continues to rise as the African country is struggling to contain militancy and gang wars. In Burundi, authorities have found over 60,000 bodies in 6 mass graves in Karusi province. Burundi's Truth and Reconciliation Commission said thousands of bullets, along with the human remains from the graves, were recovered. The commission chairman said clothes and glasses were used to identify some of the victims in the country's 12-year-long civil war between Tutsi and Hutu ethnic groups. 300,000 people were killed by 2005. The state-run commission was set up in 2014 to investigate atrocities from the start of colonization in 1885 to 2008's peace deal. The commission has mapped over 4,000 mass graves across the country and identified more than 142,000 victims of violence. In China, 142 people have died in the last 24 hours due to the new coronavirus outbreak, bringing the death toll to 1,665. The National Health Commission says 2,009 have been confirmed infected, increasing the total number of cases to 68,500. More in this report.
With hundreds of deaths by the novel coronavirus every day, China claims the number of new cases has dropped for the 3rd consecutive day. Chinese health officials say the drop shows that the epidemic is controllable overall.
There are 2,641 newly diagnosed cases of the virus, 849 newly diagnosed acute cases, and 143 new cases of deaths from the virus, of which 139 are in Hubei, 2 cases in Henan, and 1 case each in Beijing and Chongqing.
The World Health Organization says the global community should join efforts to develop a vaccine for the new coronavirus. The global health body said it will also financially help develop medicine and make it accessible for everyone.
We need to make diagnostics, we need to make vaccines, we need to make treatments, and we also need to communicate more effectively with our populations as to how they can protect themselves. And we've seen that in communities in China and Singapore. We need to empower our communities.
Tens of millions of people in China are still facing heavy restrictions on their day-to-day activities as part of the government's efforts to halt the spread of the virus.
Moving on to Islamabad, where UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has arrived to attend an international conference on Afghan refugees. Pakistan's permanent representative to UN, Munir Akram, and senior officers of the Foreign Office received him at the airport. During his visit, Guterres will meet Prime Minister Imran Khan, President Arif Alvi, and other top leadership of the country. Guterres will visit United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan today, becoming the first UN chief to make this visit. He will chair the international conference on 40 years of hosting Afghan refugees in Pakistan tomorrow. Lauding Pakistan's contribution to worldwide peacekeeping efforts, Guterres said he is visiting the country to express his gratitude to the people. For details on this story, we have our correspondent Sumaira Khan with us. Thank you, Sumaira Khan, for joining us here. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is in Pakistan. What are his activities so far? UN Secretary-General UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, he's in Pakistan. What are his activities here so far?
He is, in a short while, he'll be kicking off his visit with the official engagement and that is his meeting with a group of refugees, and they are representing the Afghan refugees ethnicity here in Pakistan, and they have been invited for this special meeting and this special interaction, one-on-one interaction with the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. And in that interaction, he is expected to hold that interaction just to get the real-time and an exclusive view from that group of Afghan refugees who are living here in Pakistan. And the interesting fact is that the meeting sought to have, they wanted to have communication with that specific group, those who were born here in Islamabad, in Pakistan, and they had their education and every facility as a registered Afghan refugee in Pakistan, and they're obviously their ancestors as well who have been living in Pakistan. So this is going to be an interesting meeting with the UN Secretary General. And as far as his the details of the meetings are concerned, we'll be getting those details in a while, as we are waiting for the Secretary General, and he'll be arriving in a short in a short while, and the first meeting with the group of refugees will be held here in Islamabad.
Right. And Sumaira, the International Conference on Afghan Refugees that Mr. Antonio Guterres is specifically here to participate in, how important is it? Help us understand the importance of this conference.
Antonio, but also Afghan Acting Foreign Minister Haroon Chakhansuri has also left Munich, and he'll be reaching Islamabad in any moment, and he is also taking part. He'll be one of the guests of honors here in Islamabad in that conference, and that conference is obviously of a great significance, because this is for the first time that a conference with the theme of 40 years of Afghan refugees in Pakistan, a partnership in solidarity. This is going to be a milestone for Pakistan's efforts towards facilitating the largest number of Afghans in Pakistan, and obviously holding this conference from the under the UN banner. In itself, it's a great achievement for Pakistan, and obviously with early tweets from the General Secretary, they also showcase the acknowledgement of Pakistan's efforts towards facilitating Afghan refugees in the toughest time, keeping in view the hardest times of economy, not just economy, but also security purposes. So this is going to be another milestone for Pakistan, and obviously once the Afghans are equally taking part in that conference, so everybody is just looking forward for this conference, that what outcome comes after this meeting and what declaration is going to be issued at the end of the conference.
What declaration will be issued? We're looking to that. Thank you so much, Sumaira Khan, joining us, our correspondent from Islamabad. Now, the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, in Pakistan for this international conference over Afghan refugees, even after the voluntary return of 4.4 million Afghan refugees since 2002. Pakistan still hosts millions more. Now, according to the UNHCR, Pakistan has nearly 1.5 million registered and over 1 million unregistered Afghan refugees within its borders. More in this report by our correspondent Isa Naqvi.
The son of Afghans who fled the war in their country and took shelter in Pakistan. Shawali was born in a refugee camp near Islamabad. This small settlement just outside the city houses about 5,000 Afghan refugees. Wali says he will not leave Pakistan, even if he is given an option to return to what many would call his home country.
I work in a close-by vegetable market. I have no wish to go to Afghanistan, as I was born here. We thank Pakistan for allowing us to live here. I have Pakistani friends here, and if asked to go back to Afghanistan, then I have offered my friends to go there with me.
Wali is not alone. Pakistan's hospitality has won over many like him, who now call this country their home.
My mother and father came here. I have never been to Afghanistan. All I know is that there is war in Afghanistan, but here we live in peace. I cannot go to Afghanistan.
Experts say the influx of Afghan refugees to a struggling economy like Pakistan has always had socio-economic repercussions. Pakistan's generosity has not been fully acknowledged by the international community.
The issue of Afghan refugees in Pakistan has been like a festering wound. With the arrival of the refugees, particularly in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan province, we saw a rise in crime, social crimes. We saw a rise in the drug trafficking.
On her visit to Pakistan last year, former UNGA President Maria Fernanda Espinosa called for compensating Islamabad for housing millions of Afghan refugees. But the pledge has yet not been translated into action. As the peace talks between Taliban and the US finally seem to be making a headway, and the holding of International Refugee Conference in Islamabad, there are hopes for a voluntary, dignified and sustainable repatriation of these refugees to Afghanistan. Reporting for Indus News, Isan Akwi, Islamabad.
Now, Pakistan has been one of the longest-serving and largest contributors to UN peacekeeping missions for the last 66 years. Throughout the decades, Pakistani missions have served across the world, including in places like Africa, Central Europe and Central Asia. More in this report.
Pakistan deployed its first-ever contingent in Congo in 1960, where it provided logistical support to UN troops. The country has since participated in 41 peacekeeping missions in 23 countries, with over 150,000 peacekeepers. During these missions, a total of 137 Pakistani peacekeepers have embraced martyrdom. Pakistan is one of the largest troop contributors, with over 8,000 peacekeepers, constituting over 9% of the UN's total deployment. Earlier this month, Pakistan's first female engagement team was awarded the UN Medal for its services in Congo. The 15-member team, including psychologists, logistic officers, and nurses, were awarded in South Kivu.
Now, in India, the Anti-Citizenship Act protesters, we'll be talking about that. But first, let's take a quick short break. Welcome back. Now, in India, Anti-Citizenship Act protesters in Delhi's Shaheen Bagh have announced a march to Union Home Minister Amit Shah's residence today. The demonstrators said the march will be made with a charter of demands, with a primary call for the act to be withdrawn. The protesters said the step is being taken because Shah announced anyone who has a problem with the act can meet him. Meanwhile, the district administration in Moradabad has issued a notice of $140,000 to organizers of the protests. The notice said protests have led to extra deployment of police, increasing the expenses of security forces. The Modi government has been facing protests and demonstrations for the last 3 months, in which 27 people have been killed. After the Anti-Citizenship Act protests, we have more from India, where stand-up comedy is becoming an increasingly prominent art form. But those comics not towing the ruling BJP's narrative are being subjected to censorship and intimidation. This report has the details.
Satire is a part of the political narrative in most modern democracies. But this can't be said for India, where anti-government comedians are facing a two-pronged attack of censorship and state intimidation. However, Kunal Kamra, a prominent anti-BJP comic, says this doesn't bother him.
Censorship will only improve me. It will make me sharper, it will make me wittier. I know all the laws, I skirt around it, and I say what I have to say.
Kamra was recently banned from a number of private airlines after heckling a prominent pro-BJP TV anchor during a flight. The move has been condemned widely as an excessive use of state power. Despite all that, Kamra managed to find his way to Singapore, where the Indian diaspora is eagerly buying tickets to his show.
It's a lot about Modi, it's a lot about the political situation in India. So he weaves it in very well in jokes, and the messages comes out. So it's not for everyone, absolutely not for the Modi supporters, but I think people who are very much balanced and who are aware of what's going on in India. So they would love his shows.
New Delhi is struggling to put a lid on mass unrest since it introduced the widely unpopular Citizenship Amendment law, which has been condemned as anti-Muslim. Time and again, the BJP government and its supporters have resorted to high-handed tactics against protesters. This includes numerous shootings at demonstrations as well as violent threats.
Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has voiced cautious optimism on the US-Taliban talks currently underway in Doha. Talking to media in Munich, Ghani spoke about Taliban's agreement for a 7-day reduction of violence with Washington. Ghani said the acid test of Taliban's sincerity will be their willingness to accept elections, something fighters have always refused to engage in. The president said the Afghan war cannot be ended through paper discussions. Rather, concrete steps need to be taken. Ghani also said the ongoing Afghan war is not a civil war anymore. Rather, it has turned into a multi-dimensional conflict. Multiple rockets have hit a US-led coalition military base in Iraq's capital Baghdad today. A US military official said the assault sent warning sirens blaring across the green zone. There have been no reports of casualties or significant damage so far. The attack comes just hours after one of Iran-backed groups of the Hashd al-Sha'bi military network announced a countdown to oust US forces from Iraq. In a tweet, the group posted a picture of an American military vehicle, saying they are closer to the US base than expected. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet. Since October, it is the 19th attack to target either the embassy or the US troops in Iraq. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has discussed the Idlib crisis with his US counterpart Donald Trump. In a statement, the Turkish presidency said the two presidents agreed that attacks by Syrian government forces are unacceptable. The two leaders also stressed the importance of restoring peace and stability in Libya. Earlier, Erdogan said Ankara won't remain silent while Syrian government forces surround Turkish military posts in Idlib. He said his talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the issue have been positive. Erdogan said US statements of support for Turkey in Idlib did not instill trust in Washington. The situation in Syria has intensified after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad launched his assault on Idlib. Human Rights Watch says Russia is key to stopping the crisis in the Idlib region. Executive Director Kenneth Roth said the issue hasn't been given attention at the Munich Security Conference. Ankara has said it will use military power to drive back Syrian forces unless they withdraw by the end of February. Russia, which backs Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, says Turkey has aggravated the situation in Idlib. NGO and civil society directors have sounded alarm over the Idlib crisis at the gathering of global policymakers.
Europe quite easily could be facing another 1 million or more refugees as people pass through Turkey onto Europe. Now, the key to stopping this crisis is Russia. The Syrian government cannot proceed without Russian aerial support.
Dubai has become home to the world's largest 3D printed building ever constructed. The structure took only 3 workers and a printer to be built. More in this report.
Dubai is known as a city of opulence that constantly tries to outdo other tourist destinations. After Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, the city has now become the site of a new architectural feat, the largest 3D printed building in the world, with walls 31 feet high and 2 stories spanning 6,900 square feet.
We in Dubai municipality have started researching on 3D printing. We have done a very long research, came up with a beautiful building with a 2-story. It has been registered by the Guinness Records book as the first.
US company Apis Core built the structure using only one 3D printer, which was moved around the site by a crane. Using 3D printing instead of traditional labor, the production cost of the project was reduced from over $680,000 to around $270,000.
city's changed quite a lot over the last 5-10 years, and there's a lot more requirement for affordable units. So if you're able to have an industry which is able to produce units at a cheaper rate because the costs are lower, because there's such a significantly lower requirement for labour within those, that means the end product is likely to be a lot cheaper as well.
The government says the building is a move towards sustainability using local materials and efficient installation to reduce energy consumption.
In Belgium, one company has introduced unlimited paid holidays for its employees. The company management says the plan will create more productivity, while workers themselves consider the proposal revolutionary. More in this report.
A multinational firm in Belgium has initiated a new holiday plan for its employees. Its workers can have paid leaves of a maximum duration of 2 weeks in addition to other leaves. The head of the firm, Gio Janssens, believes this plan will have very good effects.
The bigger goal that we have is to show that the workplace is not an enemy. Nowadays, in our economy, it starts to feel more and more often that the workplace is the enemy. Is generating frustration and burnouts. And it's kind of sad for something that you do the biggest part of your awakened life.
The scheme lets employees take many more holidays than allowed under Belgian law.
Well, it's quite a revolutionary thing, so we don't know yet the exact impact it's going to have. It remains to be seen how it will work in practice. Like, when would be the right time to take holidays, since we are actually quite busy. So I think I will probably not try so hard to make sure I have days left, which I used to do, at the end of the year. And I'll be taking days off when the weather is nice and the days are long.
The company's manager will authorize workers' holidays and will also distribute the extra workload. The employees will be able to request holidays even if they already requested all of their holidays for the year.
Pressure is on the objectives I have, which are quite high, quite demanding. So the way I see it is my goal is to reach these objectives, but making sure the workload is manageable, and that's all then my responsibility to take on that workload, to accept the workload, and also to work as efficiently as possible to make room for the holidays.
The new holiday plan will be available to employees from March onwards. This company has over 175 employees around the world, and the management has received many new applications since the unique announcement.
And now bringing you the business update. Now, Libya's UN-recognized government says the country will face a catastrophic financial crisis due to oil blockade by General Khalifa Haftar's forces. Libya's oil output has fallen sharply since January 18th, when the rival group started a blockade of oil terminals and fields. Head of the Government of National Accord, Prime Minister Faisal Sarraj, said the losses from the oil shutdowns have exceeded $1.4 billion. He said the 2020 budget will face a deficit and will drop to its lowest levels. Sarraj said foreign backing for his rival Khalifa Haftar will only prolong the conflict in the country. State-run National Oil Corporation warned earlier that oil output will eventually fall to 72,000 barrels per day from about 1.2 million previously. Haftar's Libyan National Army and al-Sarraj's GNA have been fighting since April last year for control of the capital, Tripoli. And now let's take a look at how the weather is faring in your city. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.